You have to make something that you like, that you want to drink, that you're passionate about. People sense that when they talk to you. Like if you're just kind of throwing something in front of them and it's one of 20 things you have or whatever, versus like, hey, this is my passion. Like we made this started out as a passion project and we turned it into a business. People will pick up on that. If you're looking to be an entrepreneur, you have to be willing to take risks. You have to be a little bit fearless, but you also don't want to be reckless either. You have to be smart about it.
Surround yourself people that are smarter than you.
We wanted something where we were going to help define the category of California bourbon. We wanted that to be reflected in our name so that when people saw us, immediately they thought of the coast. Coastal luxury in a bottle is how we think of it.
Isn't this really like a red ocean type business?
One of our biggest challenges is we know we have to spend money on marketing, but what's the best way to do it?
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. This is Vaulted Views. I'm your host, obviously, Ray Lucia Jr. And I almost say this every single time about how excited I am with our guests. And they just keep getting better and better and better. And today I have such an awesome special guest for you. His name is Mark Kersey. What's up, Mark? Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ray. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right. So if you remember a while back, I did an episode with Sarah Geltima. And we sampled, I think it was 6 different whiskeys, and we learned about whiskey with the EY versus a Y. And through that whole thing, actually, I think she brought me your bottle of Cask Coast. And so I think that was the first time that I was introduced to your bourbon. And so anyway, before we get into, let's just jump right into it.
Yeah.
Mark, this is amazing. This is almost like a free commercial for you. What are we drinking here, sir?
So we are a bourbon blending house. Cask Coast we started 2 years ago. And what we've got here is our 4-grain California bourbon. So we bring in our barrels from the Midwest. We are a blending house. And so we do our blending here with our proprietary whiskeys that we've put together here locally. And then we finish it for a year in my business partner's Cabernet cask after he bottles his Cabernet locally. So This is the good stuff, man. We're happy to have you drinking it for us.
Oh my gosh, the good stuff is an understatement. So I highly encourage you to look up Cask Coast and check this out. I mean, it's like drinking candy. And what's the proof on this again?
So this is 100 proof.
All right, this does not drink like 100 proof. I think it's closer to like 80.
Yeah,
like it's so smooth.
Yeah. Now, I mean, we wanted to, first and foremost, make something that we wanted to drink. And we wanted something that was good, that was full-bodied, but it didn't completely burn your throat on the way down. And I think we've accomplished that goal.
No doubt. Okay, so we're going to get into talking about your business, Cask Coast, and all the good stuff about that down the road, a little bit later in the show. But, let's learn a little bit about Mark. I mean, we just met each other. We met a few weeks ago, and then we spent a little bit of time prepping for the show today. But let's talk about who you are. Where'd you come from? Let's just start at the beginning, Mark, wherever you want to start.
Sure. Born and raised in Ohio and Columbus, and went to college in Chicago at Northwestern. Lived there for a year after graduation, moved back to Ohio for a year, and then came out to California 3 weeks before 9/11. So been in San Diego for ever since then, right? So almost going on 24 years now or whatever. And so didn't think I'd be here this long, but I just can't leave.
So Columbus, I heard Columbus, Ohio.
That's right.
So my niece she goes to Ohio State.
State, yeah.
She's on the dance team.
Okay.
And they just won the national championship for dance.
Oh, yeah.
In the category of, I think, jazz. If correct me if I'm wrong, Gianna. And then right after that, they took the whole dance team. They were, I think, in Orlando, Florida, maybe. Took them up to Atlanta for the Natty, for the championship game. And then they won the national championship. You're Buckeyes. Are you a Buckeye or are you a Bruin?
I mean, when you come from Columbus, you're born a Buckeye.
Yeah.
And so my parents met at Ohio State. Basically my whole family, except for me, went to Ohio State. My dad actually worked at Ohio State for 30 years. So yeah, you're born a Buckeye. And so
it's in the blood out there.
It's in the blood.
Right? Yeah, I got to tell you, I went to a game. It was Thanksgiving weekend. Oh, it was the infamous, Michigan.
Oof.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. But that was a turning point in the season. I actually think that was the catalyst for the playoff run. I think getting that such an embarrassing loss, I think really propelled them forward.
It was all because I was there. I'm telling you, because back in the day, you guys remember when the Cubs won the World Series after breaking the curse?
Yeah.
Okay, I took my son to opening day at Wrigley Field that year.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe I broke the curse.
Yeah, it was all you.
And so I was at that game against Michigan where they lost and they just got crushed and it was terrible. It was the coldest freaking game I've ever been to. And then they won the national championship. So there's a pattern here. So, hey guys, if you run like a professional team out there and you need a little help, just invite me. I'll be there. We'll create the opportunity for a shift and hopefully a championship for your team.
Doing your public service. I like it.
Yeah, I am. And then, we're going to talk a little about your public service here in a bit. So you went to school. You came out, you went into tech, telecom industry, and then did that for a number of years. You started up your own tech consulting business. Yeah,
I worked for a startup tech company up in Silicon Valley for a couple of years, and then they went through some stuff, and so wound up getting a job in La Jolla doing technology industry research, and did that for a couple of years. They got acquired by a bigger firm, and so I took the opportunity to break away from that, started my own company, and did that for a long time. And it was kind of scary at the time to go out on my own, but it was a great decision. Never looked back, and
awesome.
It worked out for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we've interviewed a lot of founders and entrepreneurs on this show, and I just love it when people take the risk to go do their own thing, follow their passion, their dreams, their desires, and be their own boss.
Yep.
And I bet that's exactly what you knew exactly what you're going to do when you graduated college, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. As we all do, no, I would have, at 22, I would have said it's probably more likely that I'm going to, run a whiskey company someday than a technology research company.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. So you're doing the tech thing, and then, there's this really interesting shift. And I think this is, it's interesting. All my guests, they all kind of like connect to each other. And so, Marnie von Wilpert, actually, it was Marnie that brought me your bottle. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't Sarah, it was Marnie. So go back and watch the episode with Marnie von Wilpert. She's fantastic. Love Marnie. But, Marnie, she introduced me to Cask Coast. And then mention your name, and that's how this whole thing came together. So here we are. You're in tech, you're doing consulting work, you're running your own business, and you're like, you know what? I want to help the greater good. Let me go into this crazy world of politics. Like, really?
Yeah, it was a temporary moment of insanity. I think it was one of those things where I'd always been interested in politics and government. And as a small business owner, kind of felt the impacts of, governmental decisions all the time. But, it wasn't until 2012 I decided, really 2011, that I decided I was going to actually throw my hat in the ring and run. And, previously donated to candidates and, stayed informed and active,
you're involved,
but was obviously
interested,
focused on my business. Right.
Right.
And I think that's always the biggest impediment to getting better people to run for office is that, a lot of it is not that attractive. A lot of running for office is not what you would consider fun. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of not, very fun work. And if you own a small business or, you just have a job and a family, right? It's like, it's tough to say, okay, I'm going to kind of put all that on the back burner so that I can, dedicate a year and a half to running for office. It's a lot to ask of people. And I think that's why we don't necessarily get more, just kind of average citizens, running for office.
Yeah, I kind of take for granted the actual, you think about it as 4 years, you went for 8, but it takes time to actually run initially for that. So a year and a half or 2 years, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So really you're in the game for 10 years.
That's right.
Like that's a big commitment.
It is. And if you want to do it right, you have to do that because you got to put in the groundwork. You've got to, take all the meetings because, well before you can ask anybody for a check or ask for their vote or put a yard sign in their lawn or whatever. You've got to lay the groundwork for a long time before that, just so that you can start to build the relationships that you're going to need to be successful, right? Because you don't want the first time you're asking someone for their vote or a check or whatever to be like right then when you absolutely need it, right? Like you want to have that relationship ahead of time. And so, doing that legwork ahead of time really does matter. And so I started that process pretty early, got a lot of early endorsements. Once I was able to, I raised a lot of early money and I was able to clear the field. And so I was actually the first non-incumbent to run unopposed in the city of San Diego since World War II. And that was something I was pretty happy with because I thought it indicated a pretty good, base of support from within the district.
So you basically crushed the competition so badly that they didn't even want to run against you.
Your words, not mine, but yeah.
That's phenomenal. And so you're crushing it. You're a tech entrepreneur, right? And you decide, I'm going to go run and become city council member. I bet you made a ton of money doing this job.
Yeah, that's definitely why you go into government, right? Is to make a lot of money. In all seriousness, I think that's another reason why we don't get more, business owners and people who are kind of mid-career professionals running, is because the pay really isn't that good. Yep. It's gotten better over the years. It wasn't when I was there, but it's one of those things where you kind of get what you pay for, right? And I don't want. I kind of joke. So I used to joke that, when I got elected, it was, kind of an entry level job. And in many ways it was. I mean, it paid like it. It was kind of treated that way. And I think when you have that setup, you kind of get the government that you get with that sort of investment, right? And when you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar corporation that is the city of San Diego, I think that you need to elevate those roles just a little bit. And so I think having it be a little bit more professional, having some people who do have some, professional experience, ideally private sector experience. That was one of my big things, is that there are so many people in government, continues to this day, who have never run a business, have never owned a business. There's a lot of people who've never even worked in the private sector. And I think that's a problem, because a lot of what they're doing is making decisions that impact the private sector, right? Whether it's on the employer side or the employee side, either way, it's impacting the private sector. And they don't really, a lot of them don't, they're not bad people by any means. They just don't have the frame of reference of knowledge of having been in the private sector in some kind of leadership capacity to understand what that means.
So, but in their perspective, I believe the government is their business. And so, I've got a deep Rolodex. I've been doing this Vaulted View show for a while now, and I checked up on you. All right. So, I
that sounds scary.
I did. I called Nancy Pelosi. I said, hey, I had to talk about this Mark guy. He was in politics for 8 years, and he didn't make jack. And she said, hey, Junior, he was doing it all wrong. So I'm sorry, Mark, but you don't have Pelosi's vote on this one.
Right. Well, it's funny because at the local level in California, you have to disclose everything, and if you've got any kind of situation where your financial interest, like personally, could somehow be impacted by your vote, you have to recuse yourself, right? So if I had a client who had business for the city, which happened a few times, I have to recuse myself, and I did. I was happy to do it, but it really minimizes the kind of level of some of what we've seen in Washington, whether it's Nancy Pelosi or anybody else, where you hear about these members of Congress who are making all this money doing stock trades. Mm-hmm. Presumably using information that they were to get in their kind of official capacity, right? Like at the local level, you don't have that opportunity. But obviously, different rules in DC.
Well, you didn't stick around long enough to make it to that level. You gotta put in the sweat equity.
That's right.
So they say.
That's right.
So it's fascinating. So you run 8 years, you term out, mm-hmm. right? I wish we had term limits in Congress, by the way. But you term out,
yep.
And then what? You got this decision to make, right? Like, what do I do with my life? Do I stay in politics? Do I go back to consulting? And walk me through that decision making process. Because mm-hmm. As entrepreneurs, we all come to this wall we got to climb. We either climb it or we don't. And as entrepreneurs, we say, we're going to forge forward. We're going to climb that wall, and we're going to dominate. And that's obviously what you've done. But walk us through what you were thinking.
Well, if you look back at 2020, obviously it was a presidential election year. We had a very divisive national election, goes without saying. And one of the things that I didn't really like in my 8 years, especially towards the end of my 8 years on the council, is how much the national political environment was seeping down into the local level, right? It used to be that the local level, everybody's pretty much focused on how do we govern San Diego. And unfortunately, as things became more divisive on the national level, it became more and more about, okay, where do you stand on XYZ issue that's in Congress right now? And it's like, well, I'm not in Congress. I'm running the city of San Diego, and I'd like all of us to be focused on that. So, looking at it from that lens, it just wasn't, there wasn't really a lot of appeal to staying in politics. And so going back to the private sector seemed a lot more appealing. I still owned and continue to own my technology research company. My brother-in-law was running it, still is. And so it gave me the kind of latitude. I could have just kind of gotten back into that. It would have been the easy, comfortable thing to do. But decided, hey, I've always been interested in whiskey, and happened to be having lunch with an old friend. And we were talking about both how much we like whiskey. We wanted to do something in whiskey, discovered that we had kind of been thinking about similar things. And so we decided to join forces. And so now he's my business partner. And 2 years later, here we are. And so that was really the genesis of it. Is we were having lunch and decided that, we'd been on the consumption side of the business long enough, and we wanted to get onto the production side.
And during COVID, I bet that consumption level went through the roof.
It did for me and for a lot of people. Yes,
for me,
it did.
I mean,
yes.
I don't even want to, I shouldn't disclose any of this stuff, but my bourbon intake was epic during COVID.
Yeah. No,
Had we have met, I might be your business partner today. Who knows?
That's how these things work.
Yeah. It is kind of how these things work.
Yep.
And so now you're this, self-proclaimed bourbon, what do you want to call yourself? Savant, expert,
we'll just
entrepreneur.
Say bourbonpreneur, we'll say.
Bourbonpreneur. Okay,
Yeah.
we have a new word, bourbonpreneur. Yeah. And so you and your buddy, you're hanging out, like how'd you come up with the name? Cask Coast?
We wanted
concept.
Yeah, we wanted something that was evocative of California, and it was really, there's a common misconception that bourbon has to be from Kentucky, and it does not legally. Now, most of it is, like 90+% of bourbon does come from Kentucky, but it does not have to be. And so we wanted something where we were going to help define the category of California bourbon, which is still a very small category. And we were happy to get in kind of on the ground floor of it. And so that's what we wanted. We wanted to be that, we wanted that to be reflected in our name, so that when people saw us, immediately they thought of the coast. And it was a natural fit, and really, coastal luxury in a bottle is how we think of it.
I love that. Coastal luxury in a bottle. So we're going to get into a little bit of details here for a second. You mentioned something that I hadn't really heard before at the very beginning of the show. You said you are a bourbon blending house.
Mm-hmm.
I understand bourbon blending house, but usually when I think about bourbon companies, I think about distilleries.
Yep.
So what's the difference between a distillery and a bourbon blending house, and what you are? I'm just kind of curious on that.
Yeah. So a blending house, sometimes called an independent bottler, is a tradition that goes back hundreds of years in places like Scotland and Ireland and Kentucky as well. We don't really have any of that history in California per se, because obviously it's a very new industry. And so when we looked at starting the company, we started asking around people who had been in the industry for a while, and we talked to them about actually starting a distillery. And they said, Mark, you can do that, and we'll happily sell you the equipment and kind of teach you how to do it. But the reality is, you've never distilled anything. You're not a chemist. You don't know anything about distilling. So you're going to have to hire someone who does. It's a lot more expensive to do it that way. The capital requirements are a lot more, and the whole process takes a lot longer. And when you're done, because again, you've never done this before, you don't even know if the product that you're going to end up with is going to be any good, if it's something that you can sell.
Right, because you got to age that bourbon for
That's
years.
Right. That's right.
That's a huge investment in just capital equipment plus time.
That's right. The most important ingredient in any whiskey is the water. The second most important is time and patience, right? Because you sit around and you're just waiting for the oak to work its magic on the liquid, right?
Right. Interesting.
And so we looked at it and just kind of did a cost benefit analysis of becoming a distillery with all the kind of investment of time and resources that would require versus becoming a blending house, which again is a model that's been around for hundreds of years, where you're taking liquid produced by another distillery and you're doing something interesting with that liquid, right? Now, in some cases in Scotland, it's literally just buying barrels and storing them for 25 years and then bottling it under your own brand, right?
Okay.
We didn't have, again, that kind of time. And so what we decided to do was instead put together a proprietary blend that is unlike anything else that's out there. And then with the added twist at the end of doing a second cask finishing, where we take the liquid after we do the blending and we put it into Cabernet wine casks from my business partner, Rich. He has a vineyard in the San Pasqual Valley. So we take, after he bottles his Cabernet, and he always reminds me that it's not just Cabernet Sauvignon, it's Cabernet Franc.
Okay.
It's both types of Cabernet, which apparently aren't not really, I don't really know that much about that
I think
part
they
of
both
it.
fit in the red wine category.
They're both red wine. That's exactly right. Yep.
Okay, just want to make sure.
That's right. So we take those barrels after they've been used for wine and we put our bourbon into them and then we let it sit there. Right. And so depending on the batch, and we're constantly doing tastings to see when it's ready. The current batch was in the Cabernet cask for 15 months. So over a year.
That's the first batch.
And that's the current batch. Batch 3. Yep.
Batch 3.
Batch 3.
Okay.
And so so to be bourbon, there's really only 3 legal requirements. It has to be at least 50% distilled from corn. Okay. It has to be aged in new oak barrels. They don't have to be American oak, but they typically are. New. That's the key. They have to be new oak. So once they're used once, they can't be used for bourbon anymore.
Wow.
They could be used for single malt. They could be shipped to Ireland and Scotland and other places and used over there. But for bourbon, they can only be used one time. And it has to be produced in America.
So, but it's already bourbon by the time you get it, even though you put it in.
That's right. So
barrels.
It's already bourbon. And so depending on the batch, because we have several different batches in various stages at any given time, our bourbon is either at minimum 5 years old and up to 7 or 8 years old. And so, which for bourbon, unlike Scotch, some people listening to that might say, oh, well, Scotch, we see, 12 or 15 or whatever. The difference is bourbon, because it's aged primarily in the Midwest, you get massive temperature fluctuations, right? Whereas in Scotland, you don't really get that. Yeah, it's cold in the winter, but frankly, it's also cold in the summer. And so you don't get the variation, and the variation in the climate is really what influences, because as the wood expands in the summer and contracts in the winter, it absorbs the liquid, right? And so as it's doing that, it's constantly kind of cycling the liquid through the wood. That's what imparts both the flavor and the color of the oak into the liquid. And so you get more of that in Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio than you're ever going to get, well, in a compressed period of time, of course, than you're going to get in Scotland or Ireland. And so that's why most kind of standard kind of daily drinker bourbons are more in the 4 to, let's say, 6 or 7 year age range. Whereas in Scotland, you're really not going to see too many,
right.
Too many whiskeys that are below 12. Yeah. I mean, some of the blends are, but for the most part, you're not going to see below 12.
Huh. I just learned a lot about bourbon. I mean, I go back and forth. Sometimes I'm in the mood for bourbon. Sometimes I'm in the mood for Scotch.
Yeah.
Is that normal?
Oh, I think it is. I'm the same way.
Okay.
I started off being a big Scotch guy, and then I migrated to Irish, and then I kind of migrated to bourbon. I actually didn't like most bourbons up until we started producing our own, because most of them are too sweet for me. Because corn, again, has to be 51% distilled from corn. Corn is a very sweet grain compared to barley or some of the other ones that are used. And so when you taste it, a lot of times it tastes, I don't want to say sugary, because that's more like rum, but it definitely tastes sweeter than the average single malt from Scotland or a single pot still from Ireland would. And so there's a lot of bourbons that I just don't like because they just don't fit my palate.
So would you recommend to someone who's new to whiskey, would you recommend them starting with a bourbon as opposed to like a Scotch or an Irish whiskey? Or?
I think it depends on your palate. I mean, I think there's plenty of good bourbons out there. The thing that we tried to accomplish with ours being a 4 grain. And so again, it has to be 51% corn, But then we also have a high rye component, which gives a little bit of spice.
Yeah, I can taste that.
And then we have a wheat in there that kind of smooths it out, gives a little creaminess. And then we have a little bit of barley just for a little bit of nuttiness. And that blend, we feel, gives you the best of all worlds, right? You're not getting too much sweet from the corn. You're not getting too much spice from the rye, because I like rye. It's very spicy. Some are more spicy than others.
Yep.
Some people, it's too spicy. And so we get a little bit of spice in ours, but not too much, right? And so that's what we wanted, is we wanted something that was going to be an all-around good whiskey. It's obviously bourbon, and it has, but we're right at 51% corn.
So this is awesome. I'm totally digging it. I hope you guys are digging it too. So here you are. You're like, it's in the middle of a pandemic. I can just envision these like two bros sitting around the kitchen table, and you're like mixing different bourbons together.
Yeah.
I mean, or was it like scientific, like formulaic? Like, were you guys just kind of like, was it more art or science when you came up with this? Because this again, it's fantastic.
Well, I mean, it's a good question, and it's definitely both, because it's you have to be able to replicate what you're doing, right? So you can't be all just slopping stuff around, right? Because if you find something you're like, oh, how do I do this? So you try to take it a bit from a scientific perspective, where you're like, all right, I'm going to take 3 parts of this and 1 part of this, and it doesn't have to be exact, but just trying to get a feel for what tastes good, and that's it was a hard job going through that many bourbon samples, but someone had to do it.
I bet that was real rough. I bet your wife was really, she was just loving every moment of that for you. Oh,
I tell you what, blending, just experimental blending at home in the kitchen is one of my favorite things to do. And I'll blend all kinds of, I'll put a Scotch in with a bourbon just to see kind of what it does, right? Put an Irish in there, just kind of mix and match different things. And, obviously 90+% of it, we're never going to do anything with, but it's just fun to just experiment and see what tastes good and what doesn't.
See, I thought you were going to say it was fun to do because your bedroom is just steps away. So you guys are mixing and matching. You're doing all this other stuff. You come up with this unbelievable blend. I keep saying it. It's like, are you paying me yet for this? I said I'll do it for a bottle.
Pay you in a bottle, yeah.
It's fantastic. But
thank you.
Back to the business aspect, because this is kind of a entrepreneur type founder show. I want to talk a little bit about business.
Sure.
Like this is kind of a loaded question, and I'm sure you've learned a lot, but just a few highlights. Like, what are the key takeaways of what you've learned by just starting a bourbon business from an idea from scratch?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is, and it sounds obvious, but you really have to, is you have to make something that you like, that you want to drink, that you're passionate about, right? Because people will sense that when they talk to you, right? Like if you're just kind of throwing something in front of them and it's one of 20 things you have or whatever, versus like, hey, this is my passion. Like we made this started out as a passion project and we turned it into a business. People will pick up on that. And so I think that's the first thing. And the second thing is, you look at the bourbon industry, multi-billion-dollar market, and we're not looking to own 50% of this market. That's not realistic. That's not what we're trying to do. We are a craft producer and we will always be a craft producer. And so we're happy occupying a tiny little sliver of that, as long as we're making products that we could be proud of, and we can do so in a way that people enjoy. I mean, that's fundamentally what it's about, right? I mean, it's about being able to sit down, have a glass with a friend, business colleague, whatever, and just have a good time. I mean, that's really why this industry exists. And so, occupying a small sliver and having a niche, finding a niche and filling it, I think is also key, because this is a very crowded space. Bourbon's gotten really crowded over the last 10 years. Right. The good news is there's more people drinking bourbon today than ever before. The bad news is there's more bourbon brands than ever before. And so for us, the challenge every day is, how do we differentiate ourselves? How do we tell our story to people? How do we get the product in as many people's hands as we can? Because I appreciate your kind words, that they're reflective. When people get to try it, almost 100% of the time, they really like it. And so how do we get more people to try it?
Well, I bet if there was a blind taste testing that you'd win or be top 2 or 3 almost every time. In fact, I did a little research, and I love winning. I mean, I don't think anyone loves winning more than me. In fact, years ago, a friend of mine, he goes, "You know what, Junior? Your theme song should be All I Do Is Win by DJ Khaled." And so that's kind of been like with my kids and my wife, they tease me like every time the song comes on, "Dad, it's your theme song." And I go, "All I do is win no matter what." But you know what? Who also wins? You're a winner, dude. I love being surrounded by winners. So in your first year, I discovered you won like a industry gold medal for this whiskey.
We did.
Amazing.
We did. Yeah. Thank you. We picked up, in our first year and a half, we actually won 5 gold medals. So we won first. We won our first in the first year, and then we picked up 4 more.
You guys picking that up? So you picked up 1 in the first year, and then it almost like a snowball effect, like 4 more after that. So you got 5 gold medals, and this is from a new category in California. I mean, you're probably one of the first, right? Like to take this blending house concept here in the state of California, right? I think we talked about it once upon a time. About some of the challenges that even the regulators inside the state of California didn't really understand what you were doing. And, there's different licenses for distilleries versus blending houses and all that other stuff. So, yeah, I got a good memory even after about a couple glasses of this stuff in. Hey, folks, this stuff, this Cask Coast, it makes you smart. No.
I like that.
There's a tagline.
Yeah.
So I forget where I was at, but you're winning.
Yeah.
You're winning in a short period of time. So you basically telecom tech guy turned politician, turned bourbon blending house savant to winning gold medals with this. And I don't blame them for selecting you. What was the rating? I think it said like 91 for the first year. And
yeah, we got 90 points from Wine Enthusiast. We got 91 points from the Tasting Panel magazine. We got 2 gold medals at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition, which is kind of the big daddy competition in the spirits industry. They get 5,000 entries every year. 5,000. And we've picked up a couple of golds there. We got a couple of golds at their sister competition in New York. And so, yeah, it's incredibly validating because obviously we think that what we've created is good, but when you start picking up gold medals at places like this with judges who have tried innumerable amounts of different products, it's very validating. So yeah, it's been, that part's been great for sure.
So, I'll share with you my secret to winning, but what's your secret to winning?
Well, I think you have to be passionate about what you're doing. I think you have to find a niche, especially the more competitive the industry, the more I think critical that is to find a niche that maybe someone else isn't filling, or at least isn't too crowded yet that you can actually make a name in, and then just be dedicated to it, be passionate about it, and work hard, and all of those things coming together is how we've been able to kind of rise up out of nothing and turn this into what we think is a good product and a good company. And so we're just going to keep doing it. But yeah, I think the passion has to be there. If the passion isn't there, you're not going to, I don't buy, the old adage that if you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life. I don't buy that because I do a lot of things that qualify as work that I'd rather not be doing.
Yeah.
I would love to be just sitting around all day drinking bourbon, but that's not,
it ain't going to pay the bills.
It's not going to pay the bills. That's not my life. Right. I spend more time working on regulatory filings and taxes and whatever else than I'd prefer to ever do. But you have to be passionate about what you're doing, or your success is going to be limited.
Yeah. I agree with you on this. Like, what do they say? Follow your passion and you'll never work a day in your life. BS. Okay. Go try to make some money, guys. Get a job, make some money, make so much money that then you could go follow your passion and you're going to have money and you're going to be happy. I'll tell you guys a quick story. Like this is my take on this. So I'm working at Deloitte, big tax accounting firm, global firm, working until 4:00 in the morning during busy season hours. It was insane. And then I get home at a reasonable hour. And I'm living in El Segundo, which is up near LA, near to the airport, by the way. And I turn on the TV, and my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, I don't think I had proposed to her yet. And I'm turning on the TV, and there's the race replays of Hollywood Park, thoroughbred horse racing, hosted by Bob Bedecker. Bob is like a legendary handicapper, and he walks you through the results for the day at Hollywood Park. And I was always a fan. And I turned to my wife, who's my girlfriend at the time. I go, hey, honey, I got this idea. I'm tired of doing this CPA thing, doing tax returns and staying up till 4 o'clock in the morning. What if I reach out to Bob and I'll be his apprentice? I'll learn everything about thoroughbred handicapping, and I'll get into that industry and I'll learn it, and I'll be better than anybody. And she says something like, if you do that, I'm going to leave you. She's like, just stick with what you're doing. And, fast forward, who knows, 30 something years now, maybe 28, 29, 30 years. I'm running a $2 billion wealth management firm. I've got this unbelievable opportunity. I was just telling you, like, pinch me, basically. If you told me 10 years ago that I'd be doing my own podcast inside of a vault that looks like this,
it's amazing,
with guests like you, I mean, it's unbelievable. So blessed. Couldn't be happier with not following my passion of thoroughbred horse racing, because along the way, I've owned racehorses, I've sold racehorses, I've gambled many, many times, and won quite a bit, by the way. If you guys want my handicapping tips, just hit me up at rayluciajr.com. No, I'm teasing. I'm actually pretty good at it, but that's beside the point. What did I say about all I do is win? Okay. So, love that whole part of things. But if I had followed my passion, I'd be broke. I probably wouldn't have gotten married and be like some degenerate, like, living at home with mom and dad. and instead, here I am. Right. So I don't believe in the whole follow your passion. I'm not going to tell my kids, follow your passion. Like, you know what? It'd be ideal if you can follow your passion, you can make some decent money doing it. Yeah. Right. But let's be logical. Like, let's not go get some ridiculous degree that's not going to pay you any money. Like, that's just not going to work for me. Shouldn't work for you. And there's so many kids out there. I think we're seeing it in the world today, right? Yeah. Like, with what's going on with Doge and other things. Like, these people are going to have to wake up and go, what am I going to do with my life now? Because I'm not really qualified to do anything. Yeah. Right. It's kind of sad.
Well, and I think there's a difference too, and I hear you, between following your passion and being passionate about what you do. Right. I think those are two different things.
Be passionate about what you do is different than following your passion.
Exactly. And look, if your passion leads you to a place where you could be successful, then more power to you. But I think that you have to be passionate about what you do, whether it's business or politics or anything else, because people will see that, and people will kind of use that as a gauge of how trustworthy you are, right? Like, should they buy what you're selling, whatever that is.
Right. Like, if you're not passionate about what you do, you're going to come across like you're half-assed.
That's right.
Right. Exactly. And then people they're not going to believe you.
Right.
Right. So you got to love it. Like even when I was working at Deloitte, and even though I'm not there today and I'm my own entrepreneur today, I loved what I did there because I was saving people money. Mm-hmm. Like, one of my greatest stories there was I did some extra research. It was like 2-3 o'clock in the morning. I'm trying to figure out something, and I was able to qualify one of my clients as a real estate professional. And there's some, I don't want to get into the details, but there's some IRS code at the time that would literally change the tax treatment of some real estate gains from ordinary income to capital gains tax treatment. And it saved the guy literally millions of dollars. Wow. And I was just like a staff accountant at the time, but I was like super proud of that, and you're right. What'd you say? Be passionate about what you do. Mm-hmm. Right. And I love it. And even to today, super passionate about helping my financial advisors help people with their retirement. Mm-hmm. And I love it. And again, just so blessed. And so since I'm pontificating, and this is what's happening when you're about 2 glasses of Cask Coast in, you talk too much, but you mentioned your secret to success, and mine kind of similar actually. I just have a framework. So growing up, we would sit together as a family, my wife and my 2 kids, watching Survivor. So what's the tagline for Survivor? It's Outwit, Outplay, Outlast, right? And so when I think about like that as a framework for success, it's like outwit, right? Like be a student of your business, of your industry, like know it better than anybody. And I do that. I can't tell you how many Form ADV filings, if you guys are in the industry and you know what that is, or people that I've interviewed, compliance people, operations people, all that stuff, like the entire stack of the industry. Like I am a student of the business. I promise you, there's not that many people, if there are any, that know this business better than me. And then, so what's the second one? Outplay, right? That's all about strategy, right? And so I've always believed like you got to have a strategy first approach, right? And that's all it is just being forward thinking. And I learned how to play chess at a young age. My mom taught me how to play chess. And this probably isn't the right number, because if you do the math, it's probably like physically impossible. But I always kind of would tell people, I raise my kids, I say, try to think 8 steps ahead when you're doing anything. 8 steps. And if you can think 8 steps, which is like probably mathematically impossible, but you're probably more like 3 or 4 steps ahead of your opponent, you're going to win, right? And so if you strive for 8 steps ahead, you're gonna outplay your opponent, or outplay whatever it is in your industry, overcome recession or whatever it is, or market correction, and then outlast. And that's just all about grit and determination. Like if you got the grit and determination to win, you're gonna win. It might take you a little longer, right? Maybe you're lucky and it's shorter, but you can will yourself to win if you've got it deep down inside you, right? And so outplay, outlast, outplay, outwit, outplay, outlast. And so that's the framework that I think about as my own personal secret to success, which is actually pretty much aligned with yours. So
absolutely.
All right, so let's move on. I mean, so we like to talk about founders and entrepreneurs. You've done this a couple of times. You've launched your own kind of tech consulting business, and now you're in the bourbon business. You got any like general advice for someone who's thinking, hey, I'm that guy, just like you were. I'm working at the big company. I'm making a good salary. But I want something more for myself, and I'm hitting my own personal wall. Like what kind of advice do you have for that person who's thinking about becoming their own founder and becoming an entrepreneur?
I think you have to be fearless, but not reckless. And I think that's kind of the key, because there's any number of reasons that you can come up with that are going to hold you back, that are going to keep you in your comfort zone and keep you from kind of breaking out of that and getting to where you want to go. And so you have to really understand that failure is a part of life, and not everything you do is going to work out. And you can use the lessons from failure to help propel your next victory. And you hear professional athletes talk about this all the time. I mean, no one's out there winning every game, right? Yeah. They're going to lose games, and they're going to use what they figured out in that game to win the next one. And so, you have to apply that same kind of mindset to business and just hope that you have more wins than losses. But if you just kind of sit back and you're complacent and you're just okay with being comfortable, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're looking to be an entrepreneur, you can't have that mindset, right? Like there's plenty of fantastic people who have had that great kind of life. But if you're looking to be an entrepreneur, you have to be willing to take risks. You have to be a little bit fearless, but you also don't want to be reckless either. You have to be smart about it. And so picking your time, picking your place, and understanding what you're good at, and ideally, partnering up with someone who, they complement your strengths with their own. Kind
of like what you did.
That's what we did. Right. That's right.
Yeah. That's great advice. I mean, you got to be confident, and even if you don't have the experience, right? Like understand that, you can add to your weaknesses, like find your strengths, partner with your weaknesses. Actually, it reminds me, I always go back to my Deloitte days, and I remember a gentleman, his name was Frank. He ran all of the Los Angeles office at the time when I was being hired. And this guy, he was built like Hulk Hogan. In fact, as I'm interviewing for the job, I am in the fall semester of my senior year in college. So how old are you then? Like maybe 21 years old, right? Yeah, I was 21 years old. I'm intimidated as hell. This dude is like twice my size. His arms are out to here. He's got a ponytail, right? And he's telling me, because I'm asking him, like, where are you from? Like, what's your background? And he's telling me how he used to work out with Terry the Hulk Hogan. Literally working out with the Hulkster. And it was super intimidating. And I said, don't take this the wrong way, sir. But you don't really look like an accountant. But here you are, you're running thousands of accountants here in the Los Angeles and West region for my firm, Deloitte. How did you do it? And he gave me a simple answer. And I remember it to this day. He said, surround yourself with people that are smarter than you.
That's right.
Right? Or complementary to your skills, or you can take that out to whatever. And as a 21-year-old interviewing for a job, I'll never forget it. And that's been my philosophy too. And so you partner with your partner to build this bourbon business. He brings complementary skills to the equation, and here you are winning gold medals. It's crazy, right? So pretty awesome stuff. So we talked a little bit about this bourbon blending house concept. Is it really just a cheat code to launch your own bourbon business? Because I'm really interested.
I mean, in a way it is, right? I mean, it's really comes down to what drives your passion for the industry. If you want to be the person who is distilling, you want to get in there and you want to have the stills and you want to have all the equipment and you want to go through that chemical process of making it and then getting it, out of.
But dude, I'm 50 years old, right? I got to wait 8 to 12 years from now. I mean, I don't think I have that much time. So, I mean,
it requires
chemical process or not. I mean, I think there's a lot of great distillers out there. I think you've already figured this out.
Yeah.
Like, well, you just gotta find them.
Well, and that's what we decided was we didn't need to be great distillers or distillers of any kind. That wasn't what drove us and our passion for the industry. It's like, the analogy would be wine, right? Like, do you want to be a winery or do you want to have a vineyard where you're growing the grapes and you're harvesting the grapes and you're doing all of that and be more on the agricultural side and then turning that into the final product? Or are you okay buying grapes from someone else who knows all that already? And then you just turn that into great wine, right? Like they're obviously similar businesses, but they're not the same. Right. Like I don't really know much about farming. And so I probably wouldn't choose the farming aspect unless I could hire a great team of farmhands. And so, I think it really just comes down to why are you getting in the industry? And what we decided was, we were not getting in it to be distillers per se. And by the way, it's not to say we'll never do that, right? Like there might come a point at which we decide we want to do that. But getting into it out of the gate, that was not our core competency. And it's also not why we were getting in the industry. We wanted to produce a great bottle. And so if there was a way that we could do that faster and better and frankly easier, right, in a more cost-effective way, then that was frankly it was a pretty easy choice for us.
Back to following your passion, right? Like your passion wasn't to be a chemist and distill bourbon.
That's
it was to create a great bottle. So you went straight to there, and there's this concept called a blending house.
Yep.
And you figured it out, which is pretty incredible. I mean, just awesome. But isn't this really like a red ocean type business at the end of the day? You don't understand the concept of red ocean, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, there's a ton of brands out there, and the barrier to entry it's not zero because unlike, I don't know, if you wanted to start a business on Etsy, I mean, literally, if you have a good idea and you have a good skill, you can put that up on Etsy tomorrow, right?
Yep.
Alcohol industry is not like that. It's the most regulated industry on the planet.
Sure.
Right. So
Understood.
You have to jump through a ton of hoops to get from A to B. But once you do all that, it's true. I mean, you can find a supplier of bottles. You could find a supplier of the liquid. You can, you could kind of put all the components together. There's a few different variables there. One, you got to make something good, right? Like anything has to be good. And two, you've got to market it. And I would submit that the alcohol industry is more marketing dependent than probably any industry any other industry in our economy, right? I mean, it is such a big driver of what the consumer behavior becomes. And you've got plenty of small craft brands out there making great stuff that you and I have never tried. And then conversely, you've got a number of big brands that are making okay stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes not great stuff.
Actually, a lot of the big brands aren't that good. Like I'll be traveling.
Yeah.
And the bartender will be like, you got to try this. I've never even heard of it before. And it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Right. And then, you got the big name stuff and you're like, it's okay. Yeah. I mean, it's good. I'll drink it,
right.
But so basically what you're saying is the alcohol industry, it's like what, 90% marketing?
I think it is. Yeah, absolutely.
So because you need like Clooney, you need like The Rock, Ryan Reynolds, right? Like Ray Lucia Jr. Hey, the next episode of Vaulted Views is sponsored by Cask Coast.
There you go. That's right. Now, I mean, you do. I mean, you have to invest in marketing, and it's tough because you could spend an unlimited amount of money on marketing. I mean, there's literally no end to the number of places that'll take your dollars to spend on marketing and advertising. And so as a startup, that is one of our biggest challenges. We know we have to spend money on marketing, but what's the best way to do it? And we've had some hits, we've had some misses, and we use all that to learn about what we should do this year. One of our best wins in that department. Last year, we started sponsoring the Padres. And so you listen to the Padres radio broadcasts and, the fourth inning is brought to you by Cask Coast, premium California bourbon. And they do the whole thing. And so that was an immediate hit. Like, I mean, immediately we started hearing from our retailers that they needed reorders based on those ads. And so, we're going to do that again this year.
That's
and so
smart.
How do we do more of those? Right. And so we're having those conversations right now, but we've had some misses as well. And it's all a learning process. And again, we're not, we didn't come from this industry. We're kind of making it up as we go along. And so we're good with that.
Like a true entrepreneur.
That's right.
I mean, isn't that what we do? We just kind of make it up. I mean, you think it's formulaic. It's a straight line. It's linear. I think you mentioned it's linear. It's not linear. It's this curvy line of success and failures and success and failures. And if you're not failing, you're not succeeding either.
Yeah.
And just a lovely, unbelievable story. And did I mention how great this bourbon is?
Love it. Thank you. Thank you. Never get tired of hearing that.
Oh man, I'm actually so jealous. So Lucia and Coast coming to stores near you. I'm in, baby. I'm in.
I love it.
So we'll wrap it up. I mean, Mark. I mean, thank you for joining the show. I mean, tell our viewer, like, what is next for you? Like, what do you think? What's on the horizon?
I'm just focused on growing this company. It is a full-time job. It doesn't, I don't get paid, right? So it's just sweat equity and actual equity, but no paycheck. But, everything we make goes right back into the business. And, we're just trying to build a following. In a lot of ways, craft spirits, whether it's, whiskey, bourbon, vodka, whatever, are today what craft beer was 20 years ago.
Yep.
And you've got, some industry Goliaths, and you've got some small providers that are trying to just get a little piece. And that's where we are, right? We just want a little share of the market and, hopefully get out there and convince people that, hey, this is something worth trying and give us a shot. And based on our success getting into, we're in all the Total Wines in Southern California. We're in small shops like Old Town Tequila, the Wine Connection in Del Mar, plenty of others. We're in some high-end places like the Hotel Del, the Pendry, Whiskey House, the Inn at Rancho Santa Fe, the Lodge at Torrey Pines. We feel like once we can get our product in front of people, they get a chance to try it, then a product sells itself. And so that's all we need is that opportunity, because people really they seem to really like it, which we greatly appreciate. It's really gratifying because we made something that we wanted to drink, and it's so gratifying that other people agree with us. They like to drink it too.
And I can vouch for that. I'd love to drink it. It's fantastic. It's like candy, 100 proof that drinks probably more like 80 proof bourbon, if you guys understand what that means. And so where can I go learn more about Cask Coast?
Well, you can go to our website, caskcoast.com. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook at Cask Coast. And we just, we're constantly adding new places where you can order us or buy a bottle pretty much every week. And so you can get all the latest there. And
awesome. And if you're out of state, you can order it online.
You can order on our website, and we can our third party retailer was able to ship you a bottle. So yeah, we've got fans around the country, and so yeah, just trying to sell that story of California bourbon everywhere we can.
California blending house, bourbon entrepreneur, Mark Kersey. Thank you so much for joining Vaulted Views. Can't wait to finish this glass.
Thank you, Ray. Really appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, brother.